Hello, and welcome to today's webinar on business continuity management presented by Iceberg Networks. My name is Glenn Gower from Iceberg, and I'll be your moderator today. Today's discussion is about how to add more relevant financial context to your BCM program. By knowing how much an incident will cost for every hour of interruption, you'll be in a stronger position to prioritize your investments, prevent losses, and drive a higher return on investment. I'm joined today by two of my colleagues here in Ottawa. Melissa Coho is the Director of Implementation and Integration here at Iceberg, and Maria Tao is a GRC developer with a focus on business continuity management. Welcome to both of you.
Thanks, Glenn. Happy to be here.
Before I pass things over to you, I do want to remind our audience that if you have any questions, you can send them to us via the question panel on your screen. And also, after today's webinar, we'll be sharing a link where you can download a video and a presentation deck that we're showing you today. And with that, I'll hand things over to Melissa.
Perfect. Thank you, Glenn, and thank you, everyone, for joining us. Our desired outcome for this webinar is to help participants use data to drive meaning for their business continuity management program, operational risk, and risk management in general. We propose a change of language when discussing risk, a change of approach when designing your program, and the benefits of aiming for understanding as opposed to precision. Let's consider a scenario where a senior executive is trying to understand her risk for a critical business process within her department. One which supports, for example, one which supports high net worth accounts. She is being asked to approve budget to make changes to one of the processes to improve the recovery time capability. When she asks, "What's my risk?" her business continuity practitioner informs her it's lots. When she wants to know how much will the risk be if she implements the changes, she's informed that it will be less. While I know that none of us would use these exact words, sometimes risk nomenclature can sound vague and imprecise. Going from a high risk to a low risk lacks context and doesn't provide you with sufficient information to make informed decisions. Using financial data helps us create business context. So in the same scenario where the executive is asking what is her risk, she can be informed that we have an outage. If we have an outage, we will lose $100,000 over 4 hours. And to answer the question of what will the risk be if it's implemented, she will now know that if we have an outage, we will lose $25,000 over 1 hour. Now our senior executive has clarity, is properly informed with data that she trusts. Consider the same scenario with more detail. If we have a business process with a high criticality and a high requirement for a recovery time objective, but has a low recovery time capability, it may have a remediation plan which costs $50,000 to resolve. The business unit may decide not to remediate because they don't have enough budget, it's not in their priorities, the importance is not assigned. Another way to present this would be to talk about a business process which earns the company $25,000 an hour, which will take 4 hours to recover in the case of an outage. This will cost the business $100,000 per outage. The cost of remediation is $50,000. With this information, your business will choose or may choose to modify their budget and implement the technology upgrade simply by using the math that spending $50,000 will be worth saving the $100,000 in the case of an outage. In other cases, this may not happen. Obviously, there are nuances to every company and every decision. I have seen situations where a remediation did not occur despite the risk, mostly because an application or a process is being depreciated or there are plans in the future to remediate that will be more beneficial. This change in approach is part of several required changes in perspective. I'm going to go through each of these in detail. First, by changing the conversation to one with business context, we move from an adherence-driven risk management to a business-driven risk management. Next, when we think about our business continuity management program, we need to move from thinking about features and start talking about outcomes. Finally, as we consider the data important for our program, we need to focus less on precision and more on understanding. Going from going from adherence-driven risk management, which is risk management that is defined from a top-down perspective or possibly from findings discovered by outside auditors or from compliance, requires a culture shift to move it to business-driven risk management. This requires that we start to think about risk as being something that the business itself owns and is within their best interest to resolve. This requires that we start to think about changing from being a reactive management of risk, which is we're responding to problems as they arise, to proactive management of risk, where we start to think about where could our next risk be and let's solve it before it happens. We want to change our business partners from reluctant participants to active stakeholders. When people start to realize the value of a risk management or a business continuity management program, they will be actively engaged, knowing that on a whole, knowing what to do in the case of an outage saves you money. This will change the conversation from because we have to because it's in our best interest to. We consider this to be a critical step for GRC maturity. This is a step that we are helping current clients go through and are hoping to help for future people reach the same realizations and begin to think about risk management as being business-driven. Going from thinking about features to thinking about outcomes first requires that I define what a feature is. A feature is a laundry list of items that you want to achieve from your program. A simplest example of this would be if I have a program which is being implemented into a technology tool, I'm going to come up with requirements if I'm using waterfall methodology or stories if I'm using agile methodology. These are usually very specific details such as I need a button that says send. And the reality is that you don't really need a button, you need what the button does. And what we are proposing is that if you do not ask why is the feature required, what is the outcome you're trying to achieve, you actually lose a very important feature, or pardon me, a very important detail that you need to ensure your program's success. Let's use an example that some of you actually might be experiencing right now, which is that one of the features you may have at this webinar is that as a webinar participant, I need a cup of coffee so that I can stay awake. If I never ask you why do you need a cup of coffee and I just hand you the cup of coffee and then kind of just sort of talk through my entire presentation with very flat voice and never change and don't give you presentations or stories to go along with it, I've actually missed the outcome because I didn't ask you why do you want a cup of coffee. It's so that you can stay awake, so that you can learn about a different approach for business continuity management. That's why you would need to stay awake during a webinar. And there's many different ways that we can achieve that outcome. We add snazzy images, we talk animatedly to keep your interest, and we use stories to make our point. And knowing that your outcome is to learn, I'm going to be approaching the webinar in a very specific way. But what if you wanted a cup of coffee to stay awake because you suffered from depression? Your outcome might be to feel less depressed or less tired, and this entire webinar, knowing that that's the outcome you want to achieve, would be very different and may resemble more of a psychiatric conversation. Even though we have the same feature, by changing the outcome, we end up with a very different situation. Let's apply an outcome focus now to business continuity management. Some examples for a business continuity management program outcomes could include identifying and remediating business continuity risks, knowing what to do if there is an interruption, providing trusted information to operational risk management, executives, the board. By using outcomes, you start to apply more meaning to your program, which can result in a higher impact and really improve on the value. Now let's think a little bit back to our previous conversation with our senior executive and business continuity professional. He had originally said that the risk would be $50,000 after the new process changes had been implemented. Does it add significantly more meaning to understand that the number is $57,350? Would your executive do anything differently at $50,000 versus $57,000? And how much extra work would be required to get that number? And does that value you receive from the extra work justify the effort? This is why we consider that understanding your data is far more important than being precise about your data. And we want you to be thinking about what kind of outcome you're looking for when you're using your data. So an example here is that the outcome we were looking to achieve when we said, well, you'll start out with losing 100,000 to you will lose 50,000, then we're looking to provide you with an order of magnitude for potential loss. For this, it is an understanding, not precision, that provides real value. It's been our experience that a lot of effort can be put into precision or the pursuit of the perfect numbers when really understanding is all that's necessary. And the real benefit will happen much earlier if we can keep it simple and just start. So keeping it simple and just start is something that we have been talking about a lot at Iceberg lately as ways that we can help our customers and our see value more quickly than they have in the past. One of the things that we find is that clients will end up spending quite a bit of time trying to get the perfect data and trying to get the perfect situation, the perfect workflow, and then they can keep moving forward. What we propose is that if you just keep it simple and just start, you're going to see value more quickly and actually get the improvements that you're trying to achieve in flight. Very first thing we suggest that you do is you identify what data will provide the most meaning to your business continuity management program and prioritize its collection. Data, you want to look at what data will actually drive your decisions, either during a business continuity plan process or such as creation of a plan, approval of a plan, handling a crisis, handling a test process of the plan, or the business continuity management program in general. I have to modify all my plans. For example, based on new regulatory requirements, which one should I prioritize first? With meaningful data such as being able to identify which of your plans have the highest hourly cost, you can start to prioritize how you do those changes. And as we've mentioned in the past, we want to make sure we're focusing on financials for meaningful data. It just makes the conversation much simpler and more straightforward if everybody speaks financials. The next thing you want to do is you want to minimize miscellaneous or informational data. We want to make sure that the data is kept with purpose and that it feeds the outcomes of the program. What can happen is, especially with risk and with business continuity management, operation risk management, everyone's afraid of what they don't know. And everybody's afraid that if they don't keep this piece of data 6 years down the road, 20 years down the road, they might need it, and it turns out they never kept it. The reality is that almost never happens. And additionally, the amount of effort required to keep that data actually minimizes your end user engagement. And really what we want to be able to do is maximize their engagement so that because everything they're doing, they can see value, or the very least, the majority of what they're doing. They can see immediate value and they can see the purpose and they know why they're doing this. It's also by minimizing what miscellaneous data you keep, you will minimize clutter. Minimizing clutter is important when you're dealing with reporting or even looking at looking at plans on a screen, because if you have a lot of extra data, the important data will be cluttered out and will no longer be as easy to see, and therefore makes it much more difficult for you to identify the important things to look at. This will also drive, by minimizing the miscellaneous information, you will also drive up the value of reports. Finally, we suggest that you work to avoid analysis paralysis. Now that we know that we're looking for understanding and not precision, let's apply that to how you collect your data. If you don't know everything you need, start where you are and do not wait for perfection. You can enhance and improve as you go, and in fact, having incorrect data against business continuity plan or process will likely result in faster resolution as it starts to show up in reports. Light really is the best disinfectant. If you put it out there and it's wrong, it's going to drive the correct behavior, which is correcting the information. Finally, Douglas Hubbard, in his book, How to Measure Anything, mentions that no matter how fuzzy the measurement is, it is a measurement if it gives you information you did not have before. So let's use an example. Let's say in our previous executive conversation, we knew less than we did. We did not, instead of knowing that it was a 4-hour outage, we thought it was between 4 and 6 hours. So the recovery time capability was between 4 to 6 hours with a potential loss of $100,000 to $150,000. and the cost of remediation was between $50,000 and $60,000. And that would reduce the outage to 1 to 2 hours with $25,000 to $50,000 loss. Do you think that that level of fuzziness would have changed the end decision? We don't really see a huge extra value to spending a lot of time to make sure we have the perfect numbers. So going back to the idea that we're looking for understanding, using numbers that give you, again, the order of magnitude provided a lot of value. By letting go of analysis paralysis, you can move more quickly. Now, this is where I'm going to throw everything on its ear. If you think that, back to our first example of risk, started with the starting point being less and the end point being, the starting point being I have lots of risk and the end point being now I will have less risk. If that's all you have, start there. Don't wait until you have a perfect measurement or you have a perfect idea on how you can give financial data. Just start, and you will actually see benefit as you move forward because the process will bring out new ways of measurements. Again, the goal is to move forward. These concepts that I've spoken about here can be applied to your program regardless of the technology you use. Now I'm going to be handing it over to Maria, who will be demonstrating these concepts in RSA Archer.
Thank you, Melissa. Today I want to demonstrate how we can drive meaning from data using two different tools, one being Excel spreadsheet and one being RSA Archer. Pull over the Excel spreadsheet. Remember I was familiar from earlier where the executive asked the business continuity coordinator the question, what is my risk if the business process of opening accounts with high net worth clients is down? The business continuity coordinator will work with the business unit to complete this spreadsheet, this assessment. And from the assessment, we're looking at the many assessments that people use to generate the answer of what is the impact if the process goes down. Using the spreadsheet, the coordinator gathers the information for the account opening for high net worth clients and information such as assessing for financial, operational, data integrity, and other impact areas. What is the overall impact when the process is unavailable? Furthermore, the business continuity coordinator gathers information about what is the recovery time capability as well as the recovery time objective for the particular process. The recovery time capability is the number of hours it will take to recover the process, and the recovery time objective is the expectation of how soon the process should be recovered. Now we see that from our assessment, now the business continuity coordinator has learned that the process is capable to be recovered within 4 hours of disruption. And if we know that the process generates $25,000 of value every hour, then losing the ability to open accounts for our high net worth clients is equivalent to losing $100,000 during that 4 hours of recovery time. Now our executive is wanting to know that I have a list of business processes. Which ones are my crown jewels? Which ones are my most critical processes I need to keep a close eye on? So let me pull up another spreadsheet. The business continuity coordinator now sets up meetings to work with all the different business units, teams, and to assess the business impact for their processes. Once the results are collected, the business continuity coordinator will then gather all the results and then put the information in a flat file after consolidation. This flat file contains the result of all the business impact assessments and can be sorted and filtered on key information. Also, the coordinator talks to the enterprise risk team or the owner of the process to understand the process value hourly. So they talk and gather this list of information where you can see now you have information around the particular processes. And because each business process is a collection of jobs performed to deliver certain functions and to support the company to deliver success with product and services, the business continuity coordinator also works to gather the product and service information. And after having all the information, they want to be able to, after hours of consolidation, work to clear spelling mistakes, to clear extra white spaces, to do all kinds of transport and manipulation of the files, and then finally reach this consolidated view for the senior executive. And this now shows the executive that the process, the account opening for high net worth client is indeed very important. As we can see that the process is one of the most critical processes that the executive wants to focus on. As well as losing the process is going to cause the hourly loss of $25,000, and with the recovery time capability of 4 hours, it will take $100,000 of the loss. And the executive can also understand the business context of when these processes goes down, what are the effective product and services, as we can see in here. So the product and service of account opening, the customer support, and the online banking product and services will be affected if the process goes down. Now we have seen how we can answer the question in Excel. Let's take a look at how we can answer the same question in a governance, risk, and compliance tool. Today I'll be using RSC Archer, for example. When the senior executive logs into the tool, they can see a dashboard created for them. From this dashboard, anything that interests them will be captured, such as the overall status of the business continuity program, the result of the plan testing, the efficiency of the plan, and of course, the answer to the question, why is it important and what is important and what is my risk? By looking at this report here, we can see that the report shows a list of the business processes, the reason why the process exists, as well as the process value hourly. We see the information on the recovery time capability, as well as the recovery time objective from the business impact assessment. And by multiplying the process value hourly to the recovery time actually needed for the capability, we derive the impact outage. And from this, the executive can see that what is the total impact of outage if this process is lost? And when this process goes down, what are the affected products and services? And to the right, we have a column of information on whether the recovery objective has been met. If my objective is to be recovered within an hour, but the capability is only within 4 hours, then there's a gap. And I can see that there's a gap and the recovery capability does not meet. However, when we have the time objective being 4 hours and capability is 2 hours, the objective is being met and we have a green checkbox. One thing to note is that all of these are real data. So as the recovery time capability improves, the executive is able to refresh the report and see instantaneously the check marks turning from red to green. And for our process of account opening for high net worth client, the cost of losing the process is $25 per hour, and there's currently a gap. If the executive wants to learn more about this particular process, they can click onto the process name, and they will be coming into a screen with all the important information they need to know with the process. So the executive now knows that what is the business purpose, who is my business process manager, who owns the information, and they can also know information about the details of each product and service by drilling down and seeing more details. Under the business resiliency section, this is where we saw the analysis of the process value hourly, the RTC, RTO information, and impact outage, and the analysis of whether the recovery objective is being met. And down below, we have the result of the business impact analysis, as well as the business continuity plan. From the business continuity plans, we can see the results of the test execution, whether last time what the test being executed, was it effective or ineffective. And if the executive wants to know more about what derived the RTC and RTO, they can go in further to look at the business impact assessment. When I click into the business impact analysis, I can see the information. Okay, so this is ABI, and with the process hourly revenue with 25K, and the overall criticality rating information is median high. And this is being assessed from 7 different categories of information, ranging from strategic impact rating of medium low, operational rating of medium, data integrity, reputation, financial, compliance, data integrity, as well as the recovery time objective and recovery point objective being assessed. So all of these information are available for the executive if she's interested to learn about the details. And now remember that earlier today we talked about keeping it simple and just start. I want to show you that by toggling between showing only the key information of the form to having the full capability of the form can show, we can now see a lot more information. So the tool is capable of showing the approval of the BIA, the next BIA start date, the comments that you have gathered through your review and through your process talking to the business unit, the key business stakeholders, the other related business processes that you may consider during your assessment, the different accounts opened, as well as your interview questions that you may have asked the business unit during your interviews with them, and a lot more. So coming back, we want to emphasize that to get started, we want to focus on the outcome. So what are the questions that our executives want to know? What information do we collect to better understand our business, and what do we need to keep it simple and stay proactive with our business-driven risk management program? Now, going back to the top, where I toggle the information to only show the key information. This is capturing only the data that means something for the business. And we only want to use a form to capture key information so that it adds to the understanding and it can achieve the outcome that we desire. And with these, I will pass back to Melissa.
Thank you, Maria. So business continuity management is a journey on which we're all on. And by changing your language when discussing risk, augmenting your approach when designing your program by using outcomes as opposed to features, and aiming for understanding as opposed to precision, you can take the next step in your GRC journey. We have, as you've heard, we do consider that defining your outcomes to be important for your program and for your program's success. To start you off, here are some additional examples of program outcomes that we have seen. They can include identifying the crown jewels of the corporation, which is something that Maria has demonstrated, knowing your crown jewels' readiness to recover, having a high user adoption of your business continuity management program, and applying a consistent workflow for plan creation, testing, and findings. Finally, understand the recovery time objective and recovery time capability. Everything we do at Iceberg is about helping organizations deliver value from their risk management programs, focusing on outcomes from workshops to implementation and post-production services. I especially want to mention our Risk Intelligence Academy, on which a copy of this webinar will be, as well as case studies, best practices, and past webinars. Thank you very much, and back to you, Glenn.
All right, well, you're not quite off the hook yet, Melissa Maria. We do have a few questions for you as we go. Well, I'll just jump in no particular order. Keep it simple and just start. Where do you recommend people get started if they want to improve the maturity or improve their BCM program? I know you said just start, but what are some common launch points for the journey?
So what I usually recommend to customers is that when you're looking at making your next step is start with two things. The first thing is, what questions am I being asked by senior management or by the board that I cannot currently answer with my existing processes? And how do I get those answers? How do I make it easier? The second question is looking at what feedback do I get from my end users that I can improve on so I can make their lives a little bit easier. This is covering two different approaches. One is focusing on the effectiveness of your program, which is making sure you're getting the meaningful data up to the board or to your chief risk officer. And the second is focusing on the efficiency of the processes and the tools that you are using. And that can those are the two items that I think have the biggest impact on your program.
Okay. Another question was around frameworks. When you're building out some of this financial information or the measurements, are you using any specific framework as a guide, or any other kind of best practices that this is based on?
I'm just pausing for a moment as I think, and now I'm speaking out loud so I don't leave dead air. What really drove this is there's actually some fields that come out of the box Archer that we were realizing are not being used frequently, and that what happens when we get focused on our programs, we tend to get focused on how the workflow works, and sometimes that forgets how do we get meaningful data up to our executives. So the short answer to your question is no. We're not using a specific framework. We are using tools that are defined by previous risk practitioners and business continuity management practitioners to define what our next steps are and our experience in the field, but not a specific one.
Okay. Another one would be, you spoke earlier about the culture shift necessary, and it would be a question around how do you start to build that support within an organization? Maybe it's executive support or stakeholder support. Any advice on how to start working towards that shift?
Having a very strong senior stakeholder supporting your program is critical for program success. That does mean having their involvement throughout your program and throughout your program's journey, and having a really strong vision on how your program is going to go. If you don't know where you're going, you're never going to get there. So having an idea on how do you move, where do you want to be in 5 years, where do you want to be in 3 years, and where do you want to be in 1 year, and then starting to take the steps and having alignment with your senior stakeholders is really what's necessary for the culture shift to start to happen. This is going from dealing with what's right in front of you with thinking about, well, how am I going to get my risk program or my business continuity management program to the next step. All right.
Maybe this is a bit of a facetious question, but one person asked, we're pretty small and we're still in Excel. Is there any hope?
Yes, there is. So there are, we talk about using RSA Archer, and I think that it's a fantastic tool. And I think that coming up with your next steps on how do you operationalize your tool is important. But Excel has its values. And I wouldn't want anyone to come away from this and think that, well, if I'm in Excel, I have no hope, and I have to go and really grow the maturity of my program before I keep going. So what I would do if I were dealing with a client that was in Excel and doing their program that way is, let's start to talk about what outcomes you want from your program, and where is your current program not meeting those outcomes, and what steps can we now take to improve sort of the fidelity between what you have today and the outcomes you want for tomorrow. And just start making small steps, and you're going to find yourself probably using a tool to help operationalize it, simply because at a certain point Excel can't do the job. It's hard to do big reports. It's hard to trust that what was like the file that's on your file server is still valid and the data is up to date. But Excel is a perfectly good starting point.
Okay, maybe this is a question for Maria, a question about the RSA Archer configuration that you showed there. The question is, can it be customized to allow the VIA to show impacts, can the impacts be calculated differently than what was shown in the demo today?
Yes, certainly. We have, the calculations are often being tweaked for the different clients. We've had impact being calculated from different set of questions. All the different questions on the interview questions I've shown can further drive the different high level of the category impact. So you can tweak the questions, you can tweak the different answers available to select. You can also tweak what each answer means. Does it weigh 10% or 20%, or do you rather just have more lesser calculation and more manual input? So all of those are what we call configurable, and we can definitely tweak the business impact assessment to the extent of what the logic is for the particular organization.
So here's one, thanks Maria. Here's another one, maybe more of a comment or a suggestion, although perhaps the question is about the ability to compare your own organization to industry standards for what other organizations are spending on BCM. So have you guys ever seen examples of comparing industry spending? So, so an organization could understand, are we behind, in the middle of the pack, or ahead of the pack in our investments?
So we wouldn't normally put that into RSA Archer necessarily, but that is something that that need is getting more and more common. We're hearing a lot from people in the field that they want to know, how am I doing compared to other companies within my industry? What processes can I benefit from that other, or what learnings or lessons, there we go, lessons. What lessons can I take from other people's experiences and use it to apply to my own program? And that's something that usually, if you have someone who has that experience, so for example, we deal with multiple clients across multiple industries all across North America. We would normally start to provide that feedback so I want to say in situ, but it's essentially like as we're going, to be able to provide you verbally or provide you as part of the experience we've had in other clients and how we design the tool. That's something that we would offer based on industry experience. That answer got away from me, but hopefully that helped.
No, it's an interesting idea too, because we're certainly seeing in the world of cyber risk a lot of sharing of information between organizations, and not necessarily direct one-to-one communication. Kind of a pooled resource of information. So it'd be something interesting to explore for BCM as well.
Absolutely, yeah, we'll look into that for sure. And I think, sorry, there are some. Go ahead.
You go ahead, Melissa, then I'll follow up.
Okay. There are some, obviously there are business continuity practitioner groups. I'm trying to remember some of the names, and now I'm looking at Maria.
Disaster Recovery.
We've got the DRI, and so the Disaster Recovery Institute. There's, I know that there's operational risk management conferences that can be attended where you might get some of that grouping as well, but trying to think of a way that we could operationalize that is a really interesting question that I'm going to take back and think about, see how we can apply.
Yeah, I was going to suggest the same thing. A lot of the peer groups and industry groups that are out there, if you are using a BCM platform, even a lot of the vendors will have user groups as well that, that might be an interesting conversation to explore there as well.
Absolutely.
So I have one more question that I know I can answer, and then I think we'll wrap things up. The question is, will you be sharing this demo and the slides after the fact? And the answer is definitely yes. We'll be sharing on our website. So we'll be sharing that link later. We'll email that out to everybody on icebergnetworks.com. I see one more question. I was just about to wrap it up, but one more question. Maria.
Yes.
Maria or Melissa, what have you seen in your experience as the low-hanging fruit in terms of outcomes that clients have initially leveraged a GRC platform for?
I think a lot of times we start with having a single repository of information. So when I was showing the spreadsheet example, many times we spend time on really just consolidating information by pulling information from different lists of information. And when we have a GRC tool like Archer, then you can start to have that single point of the repository where everybody can see, and you just can stop worrying about spelling mistakes, having duplicates, or all kinds of issues where you are using Excel spreadsheet, and consolidation will have issues further. So many times when we start, really it's having that single source of truth. It's very helpful to just get started.
I love the fact you just said single source of truth, because I think that really is probably like that one major low-hanging fruit that most people will start to use. You can also apply that to making sure that workflow is being applied consistently across the board. And I'm going to throw one more out there, which is actually, this is the low-hanging fruit that I don't think most people are taking advantage of when they're first operationalizing their business continuity management program, and that is executive reporting and being able to start to gather the information that goes up to senior management. One of the big things we notice is that when, by the time a program is being put in place, we're so focused on getting the plans in and the plan workflow that we lose sight of what needs to go to the board, what needs to go to senior management. And that's something that we're working at Iceberg to make sure that we're correcting, because I think that's a huge value that it's not always being taken advantage of.
Okay, well, thanks to both of you for the answers. I think we've exhausted our question queue. I want to thank both of you, Melissa and Maria, and thank everyone who was able to tune in today to listen to the discussion. And we would be happy to continue the conversation with anyone offline if you want to do a bit of a deeper dive on the demo or explore any of the functionality or any of the concepts we've presented here today. A copy of the presentation deck and a video, as I mentioned, will be available later today on our website at icebergnetworks.com, and we'll let you know by email when that's ready to go. And with that, we will say goodbye for now and hope you have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.